Eric stood quietly at the edge of the alien market. He was just a visitor here on a world called Tavaray, far from Earth. The sky was always purple, and twin suns burned above. Around him, tall, scaled aliens with sharp horns and colored robes walked with pride. They belonged to different clans, each with their own color and symbols. Eric kept his head low. He knew humans were rare here. He didn't want trouble. But today, something caught his eye. A circle had formed in the middle of the market. People stood around, watching, whispering. In the center, a young alien woman stood alone. She held a sword in her hand, her body bruised and bleeding. Her long black hair was messy, and her golden eyes burned with anger. Her name was Soraka. Eric had seen her before. She was a warrior of her clan, proud and strong. But now she was in danger. Around her stood 5 bigger alien males, warriors from a rival clan. They mocked her, throwing stones and spitting insults. Eric looked around. Many of her own clan stood nearby. They watched but did nothing. They whispered, but their feet stayed still. Why aren't they helping her? Eric muttered to himself. Then he saw it. Beside Soraka, stuck in the ground, was a tall sword. It was different from her weapon. This sword was heavy, old, and marked with her clan's symbol. It stood like a silent guard, but no one dared to touch it. Eric didn't understand their traditions, but he understood one thing. Soraka was losing strength. She could fall any minute, and those thugs would kill her. He stepped forward. "Stop, human!" Someone from the crowd shouted, "Do not interfere." But Eric's blood boiled. He had seen bullies before back on Earth, in school, in life. He hated them. Without thinking, he walked into the circle. The crowd gasped. The thugs laughed. "A human? You want to die too?" One of them mocked. Eric ignored them. His eyes locked onto the sword in the ground. Something about it called to him. His hands moved before his mind could stop them. He gripped the sword. The air changed. Gasps filled the market. The crowd stepped back, whispers turning into fearful murmurs. Even the thugs froze for a moment, but Eric didn't notice. The sword was heavy, but his anger made him strong. He lifted it and stood between Soraka and the attackers. "If you want to hurt her," Eric said, his voice firm, "you'll have to fight me too." The thugs exchanged looks. Then they laughed. A human with a clan sword? This is a joke. But Eric stood firm. The first thug lunged forward, swinging the sharp blade. Eric raised the heavy sword just in time to block it. The force shook his arms, but he held on. He pushed back, swinging wildly, and caught the thug's shoulder. The alien cried out and fell. Another came from the side. But Eric turned and slammed the flat of the blade into his chest, sending him back. Eric wasn't a trained fighter, but his rage, his will to protect, gave him strength. And the sword, it felt alive in his hands, guiding him as if it knew the fight. Soon, the thugs realized the human wasn't an easy target. They backed away, dragging their injured friends. "This isn't over," one of them shouted before running off. The market fell silent. Eric stood there, breathing hard, the sword still in his hands. Then he turned to Soraka. She stared at him, not with thanks, but with wide, shocked eyes. "Here," Eric said, trying to hand her the sword. "I think this belongs to you." But Soraka stepped back. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear and disbelief. "What?" Eric asked, confused. The crowd started whispering louder. "He touched the sword. He doesn't know." "Does he? Poor fool." Soraka shook her head. You don't know what you've done, human." Eric frowned. "I just wanted to help. I couldn't stand by and watch." Soraka's voice was low, almost a whisper. "You touched my clan's sword. You fought with it to protect me. You understand what that means here?" Eric shook his head. "I don't care about your rules. I couldn't watch them kill you. but Soraka's eyes filled with worry. She said slowly, "You didn't just protect me. By holding that sword. By fighting for me, you've made a claim." "A claim?" Eric asked, blinking. She nodded. "You've claimed me as your mate. Your wife." Eric's eyes widened. "What?" The crowd kept watching. Some looked angry, others looked curious. But all of them knew Eric had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross, and he had no idea what was coming next. No one moved. The wind passed gently through the market, but the air was heavy, like the whole planet was holding its breath. Eric stood confused, the heavy clan sword still in his hand. He had won the fight, but somehow it didn't feel like a victory. Soraka's golden eyes stared at him, wide with disbelief and fear. She was bleeding, but she didn't even care. She whispered, almost to herself, "You touched the sword." "The sacred sword." "Yeah," Eric said, panting. "I just helped you. That's all." But Soraka shook her head. "No, human. You did more than help. You broke a sacred rule." Then loud footsteps echoed. A group of older aliens wearing ceremonial robes pushed through the crowd. Their horns were longer, their robes decorated with silver threads. They were clan elders, and their faces were grave. One of them, an elder with deep scars on his face, pointed a clawed finger at Eric. His voice was sharp and heavy. "Who gave you the right, human, to take up a clan's heart sword?" Eric blinked. "I don't know what that means." "She was in trouble. I couldn't just watch." "You couldn't just watch?" The elder growled. "Your ignorance does not excuse you. You've committed the forbidden act." Eric looked around, seeing the disapproving eyes, the fearful faces. Even Soraka looked troubled. "What forbidden act?" Eric asked. Soraka finally spoke, her voice low. "The sword you lifted. It is not just any blade. It is my clan's heart sword, the symbol of my family's honor. Only a chosen mate may lift it in defense of a clan female." The elder stepped closer. "By our law, by blood and tradition, the one who lifts the heart sword in battle for a female binds himself to her as husband." Eric felt his stomach drop. "Wait. I didn't mean." "It doesn't matter," the elder snapped. "Intention is nothing before the law. You held it. You fought. You claimed her. She is yours." The crowd murmured louder. Eric looked to Soraka, hoping she would deny it, hoping she'd say it was a mistake. But she lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "It is true," she whispered. "You have made the claim." Eric's heart raced. He had just wanted to help. Now they were saying he was married? "But I didn't ask for this." Eric shouted. "Nor did I," Soraka said quietly. Though her eyes glimmered with a strange sadness, the elder slammed the butt of his staff on the ground. "The claim is made. You cannot refuse. What happens if I do?" Eric asked. The elder's eyes darkened. "If you deny her now, you shame her. You shame the clan. The punishment for a rejected claim is death. For her." The words hit Eric like a punch. "Death?" Soraka nodded slowly. "If you walk away, they'll kill me for being unwanted. I'll be marked as dishonored." Eric's mind raced. He wanted to protest, to argue that this was madness. But one look at Soraka's face stopped him. She stood proud, even though she was hurt. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't plead. She was prepared to die with dignity if that was the price. "But there must be a way out," Eric said desperately. "Another." Elder spoke, his voice cold. "There is a way. But you won't like it." "What is it?" The elder smiled grimly. "If you wish to reject the bond without her death, you must face the trial of breaking, a deadly challenge. If you survive, the bond is broken, and she lives. But if you die, the bond dies with you." Eric looked to Soraka. She stared back, saying nothing, but her eyes pleaded. "I never asked for this." Eric muttered. Soraka finally stepped forward. Her voice soft. "Neither did I, but now we are both trapped." For a long moment, Eric stood still, the weight of the sword heavy in his hands and the weight of fate heavier on his shoulders. The elder sneered. Or, you can accept her, take her as your wife. Honor the bond. It is your choice, human. Eric didn't answer. His mind was spinning. On Earth, life was simple. Now on this alien world, a single act of kindness had chained his life too. Someone he barely knew, yet deep inside, something else stirred. When he looked at Soraka's wounded form, her proud eyes, he felt something more than fear. He felt responsibility. He had touched the sword. Now the sword had touched his fate. The sword in Eric's hand felt heavier than any weight he'd ever carried, not because of its steel, but because of its meaning. He stood surrounded by eyes filled with judgment, curiosity, and even hate. Somewhere deep in the crowd, a child whispered to her mother, "Why did the human touch the heart sword? Doesn't he know what it means?" No, he didn't know. But now, Eric was starting to understand. Soraka stood silently beside him, her wounds still bleeding, but she didn't show pain. Only her clenched fists betrayed her fear. She looked at Eric as if she was seeing a storm that she could not stop. Eldest among the clan council stepped forward. His horns were silver with age, and his eyes sharp as knives. His name was Elder Vorkin. "Human," Vorkin said, "before you speak your choice, you must hear the full law. This law is older than our clan, older than our world's written words, and once spoken, it cannot be ignored." Eric swallowed hard but nodded. Vorkin's voice echoed across the market. The heart sword is not just a weapon. It is the soul of the clan's lineage. Only a blood-bound mate may lift it for a female in battle. To do so is to declare, "I will protect her with my life. I will stand by her until death takes me." The crowd nodded, murmuring the ancient words with the elder. Eric stared at the sword, his grip loosening. He never meant to say those things. He just wanted to stop the fight. "If the bond is accepted," Vorkin continued, "you will become her mate, a husband in the eyes of every clan on Tavara. Refusal means her death, unless you win the trial of breaking." Eric's heart pounded. He looked at Soraka, and their eyes locked. "I didn't know," Eric whispered. Soraka's lips barely moved, but she said, "It doesn't matter. The sword knows. The clan knows." Then another voice spoke, deep and commanding. "I say let him prove his worth." This was a younger elder named Korax, his body strong, his robes dark as night. "Let the human face the trial. If he survives, we shall honor him, bond or no bond. If he dies, then fate has spoken." The crowd murmured in agreement. Vork and raised his hand. "It is his choice." Eric closed his eyes for a moment. He had two options: accept the marriage to Soraka, a woman he didn't know, on a world where he didn't belong, or face a deadly trial, alone. He opened his eyes and spoke. "Tell me about this trial." Vorkin smiled coldly. "You will face the beast of the deep sands, a creature that even our strongest warriors fear. You will have no guide, no weapons except the sword you carry. Survive, and the bond breaks. Refuse the trial, and you must marry Soraka." Eric looked down at the sword. Its surface was marked with runes, glowing faintly. He felt like it was watching him. But then, he looked at Soraka again. "You'll die if I walk away without the trial, won't you?" Eric asked. She nodded once. "Yes, but I won't beg for my life." Eric thought for a long time. He didn't want to be tied to a stranger, but he couldn't let her die because of him. "I'll face the trial," Eric said quietly. "I can't marry someone I don't even know. But I won't let her pay for my actions." The crowd gasped. Vork and nodded. "So be it. The trial of breaking begins at dawn." Suddenly, Korak stepped forward. His eyes glimmered with interest. "I will personally oversee the trial," he said. "I want to see if humans have courage, or if they are just fools." Vorkin agreed. "Prepare yourself, human. Many have tried, none have returned. Eric gripped the sword tighter. Then I'll be the first. But as the crowd began to disperse, Soraka stepped close to Eric. She looked up at him, her voice soft but fierce. You don't know what you're walking into. That beast kills without mercy. Why do you care? Eric asked, his voice gentler. You barely know me. Soraka stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, because even though you don't want me, you still chose to protect me. No one's ever done that before. Eric didn't know what to say. The weight of his decision pressed on him, but he knew one thing. Whatever happened next, his life would never be the same. The twin suns had not yet risen, but the ground already trembled. Eric stood at the edge of the wasteland, endless sand stretching far into the horizon. In the distance, sharp rocks rose like broken bones from the earth. Somewhere out there, the beast of the deep sands waited for him. But Eric wasn't alone. Behind him stood a large gathering of the clan. Elders in dark robes, warriors with gleaming weapons, and ordinary people watching in silence. The whole clan had come to see if the human would survive or die. Elder Korak stepped forward, his voice loud and cold. Human, you stand before the clan. You face the trial of breaking. If you survive, the bond to Soraka will be broken, and you will be free. Korax looked at the crowd, then at Soraka, who stood nearby, her face unreadable. If you die, Korax added, your bones will stay here, and the bond will die with you. Eric gripped the heart sword, its weight familiar now. He wasn't trained, but his mind was clear he would fight. He had to, but then, from the crowd, a sharp voice called out, I demand a word with the elders. Heads turned. It was Soraka. She pushed her way forward, her body still weak from her earlier wounds, but her voice strong. Korax frowned. Speak, warrior. Soraka stood tall. Let me enter the sands with him. The crowd gasped. Eric blinked. What? No. This is my trial, not yours. Soraka ignored him. She kept her eyes on the elders. By our laws, a bound mate can face the trial alone. But there is no law that forbids the claimed from standing beside him. The elders whispered among themselves. Vorkin looked displeased. You risk death, Soraka. Why? She didn't hesitate. Because I cannot let him die for a bond I didn't ask for. If he dies, I die anyway. Korax chuckled. You're clever, girl. But if you both die, the bond is erased. So be it. Let her go. Eric stepped close to her. Why are you doing this? You said you wouldn't beg. Soraka looked up at him. I'm not begging. I'm fighting. And I don't want to watch you die, human. Eric sighed, a strange warmth in his chest. My name's Eric, she smiled faintly. Then let's not die today, Eric. Korax raised his hand. So it is decided. Human and claimed both enter the sands. If they return alive, the bond will be reviewed. The clan parted, forming a path. The sands waited like an open mouth, ready to swallow them whole. As Eric and Soraka stepped forward, Eric asked quietly, what is this beast anyway? Soraka's face darkened. They call it the Sand Maw. It's huge, armored, and hunts by sound. One wrong step, and it rises from below. Great, Eric muttered. Any other bad news? She nodded. It hasn't eaten in weeks. Eric laughed nervously. We're doomed. But deep inside, he wasn't ready to give up. Not with her beside him. As they stepped into the sands, the crowd watched, the suns beginning to rise, casting a red glow over the wasteland. The trial of breaking had begun. The ground was breathing. Every few seconds, Eric felt a soft pulse beneath the sand, like something massive was sleeping below, listening, waiting. He glanced at Soraka, who walked carefully beside him, every step light and slow. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her body tense. Don't step too hard, she whispered. It hears everything. Eric nodded, trying to copy her careful movements. But the sand was tricky, soft in some places, solid in others. He gripped the heart sword tighter, feeling its warmth in his hand. "How big is this thing?" Eric asked. Soraka whispered back, "Big enough to swallow a house." Eric's throat felt dry. "Great, and here I thought I'd have a quiet vacation on an alien planet." Soraka chuckled softly. "You're strange, human." Their eyes met for a second, and for the first time, Eric saw something in her gaze that wasn't anger or fear, just curiosity. Maybe even respect. But that moment broke when the ground shook sharply. Soraka froze. "It's moving." Suddenly, the sand to their left exploded upward like a volcano. A giant mouth, lined with spiraling teeth, emerged. The sand maw roared, its skin like stone and metal, its massive body hidden beneath the earth. Eric's heart raced. "What do we do now?" Soraka grabbed his arm. "Run!" They sprinted, but every step made the beast follow, diving back under, creating waves of sand chasing their feet. "We can't outrun it forever." Eric shouted. Soraka pointed to a sharp rocky hill ahead. "If we reach the rocks, it can't dig through stone." But the beast was fast, the sand beneath them cracking, ready to swallow them whole. Then Eric had an idea. "Give me your dagger," he yelled. Soraka tossed him a short blade without question. Eric stabbed the dagger into his own arm, drawing blood. "What are you doing?" she shouted. But Eric smeared his blood on a piece of cloth and tied it to a stick. "Keep running," Eric ordered. He threw the bloody cloth far to the side. The smell of blood hit the air, and the sand maw shifted direction, diving toward the scent. Soraka's eyes widened. "You tricked it! Bought us time," Eric panted. "Now run!" They reached the rocks just as the beast burst from the sand again, snapping where they had been moments ago. Its teeth crushed the bloodied cloth, realizing too late it was. Fooled from the safety of the rocks, Eric collapsed, breathing hard, his arm bleeding. "You're insane," Soraka said, sitting beside him. "I'm alive, though," Eric grinned. "You're welcome." She tore a piece of her clothing and tied it around his wound. "You fought with more heart than some of my own warriors," Soraka admitted. Eric smiled weakly. "And you're braver than most people I know." They rested for a moment, watching. The sand maw circle around, frustrated, but unable to break the stone. Eric looked at her seriously. "We can't hide forever. How do we kill it?" Soraka thought for a moment. "Its underbelly is soft, but it only shows when it rises fully from the sand." "Then we make it rise," Eric said. She nodded. "We'll need a trap." Together, they began to plan, using rocks, cloth, and the heart sword. They didn't have much, but they had each other's will to survive. For the first time, Eric realized he didn't just want to live. He wanted Soraka to live. He wanted to know more about her, her strength, her pride. He wasn't just fighting for freedom anymore. He was fighting for her. The night fell like a curtain of black silk, and the desert grew cold and silent. But beneath the surface, the sand maw was still awake, circling, hunting, waiting, on the rocky hill. Eric and Soraka stood side by side, their breaths misting in the cold air. Before them, they had prepared a trap. A deep pit between two sharp stone ridges, hidden under a loose layer of sand and cloth. "If it chases us through here," Soraka explained, "its weight will collapse the ground. The rocks underneath will spear its soft underbelly." Eric nodded, tightening the bandage on his wounded arm. "And if it doesn't fall in?" Soraka looked at him seriously. "Then we die," Eric chuckled faintly. Comforting. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars above. Strange constellations hung in the sky, patterns Eric didn't know but found beautiful. Then Soraka broke the silence. "Why did you really come to help me, Eric? You didn't know me." Eric looked at her, his voice honest. "Because back home, I watched people get bullied, hurt, ignored. I promised myself, if I ever saw it again, I'd never stand by. Soraka's golden eyes softened. Even on a world that isn't yours? Right is right, Eric said. Quietly, she smiled, just a little. You're a strange human. Suddenly, the ground rumbled. It's coming, Soraka warned. The sand maw burst from the sand, roaring, its teeth glinting under the twin moons. Its body twisted, sensing their vibrations. Eric and Soraka locked eyes, then ran across the trap area, stomping hard to lure the beast. The maw dived after them, shaking the ground with its hunger. The moment it passed over the trap, the sand collapsed. For a second, nothing happened. Then cracked. The rocks beneath stabbed into the creature's belly. It roared in agony, its body thrashing, sand exploding everywhere. But it didn't die. It's still moving. Soraka yelled. Eric grabbed the heart sword. We finish this. He ran forward, dodging the wild swings of the beast's tail. He climbed the creature's side, the rough skin tearing at his hands. Eric! Soraka shouted, throwing her spear. He caught it, barely. He reached the wounded underbelly, where the rocks had split the flesh. With all his strength, Eric plunged the heart sword deep into the beast's heart. The sand maw screamed one last time, then fell still. Silence. Eric collapsed on the sand, gasping for air. Soraka ran to him, pulling him up. You did it, she whispered. We did it. Eric smiled weakly. Guess that means I'm free, huh? Soraka looked away, her face unreadable. Yes, the bond is broken now. But Eric saw her eyes saddened, quiet. Do you want the bond broken? Eric asked gently. Soraka hesitated. Then she said, I didn't want it forced. But I don't hate the idea anymore. Eric chuckled. Neither do I. They stood together, watching the dead beast. The stars above seemed brighter. We should go back, Soraka whispered. They'll be waiting. Eric stood slowly, looking at her. Soraka, when we get back, they'll ask me to choose. Break the bond completely, or accept you as my wife. She nodded, saying nothing. I've already made my choice, Eric said softly. She looked at him, eyes wide. You'll see. The sun was rising when Eric and Soraka returned to the clan grounds. Their steps were slow but steady. Every muscle in Eric's body ached, but he carried himself with pride. Beside him, Soraka walked tall, her head held high. Their clothes were torn, their skin marked with bruises and dust, but their eyes burned with life. They had faced the sand maw. They had survived. As they entered the clan square, the air grew heavy. Warriors, elders, children, and commoners all gathered in silence. Everyone watched them, two figures walking out of the sands when none were expected to return. Elder Vorkin, face like carved stone, stepped forward with his staff. Elder Korax stood nearby, his eyes sharp, watching Eric closely. You return alive, Vorkin said slowly. You have completed the trial of breaking. By law, the bond between you and Soraka is dissolved. You are free. The crowd murmured, waiting to see what the human would say. Eric stood still, looking at Soraka. She said nothing, her expression calm, but her hands were tight at her sides. She was waiting too. Eric took a deep breath. He looked back at Vorkin and the crowd. You say the bond is broken, Eric said. But I choose to keep it. The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like fire. Even the elders exchanged surprised glances. I choose Soraka as my wife, Eric continued. Not because of your law, not because of the sword. I choose her because I want to. Soraka's eyes widened. She stared at Eric, her mouth slightly open. She had not expected that. Vorkin's face was unreadable. You understand what you say, human. You bind yourself by will. There's no going back. Eric smiled faintly. I know. And I'm not going back. The air stood still until Korax stepped forward, chuckling. Well said, human. But words are not enough. Vorkin nodded. There remains one final rite, the sword ceremony. You must hold the heart sword again, and if it accepts your spirit, the bond is sealed forever. If it rejects you, your heart will stop and you will die. Soraka stepped closer, alarm in her eyes. Wait, that's too dangerous. He's not even of our kind. Vorkin shook his head. Our law is old. It applies to all who make the claim. Eric turned to Soraka. It's all right. I'm not afraid. I've come this far. I'm not quitting now. Soraka grabbed his arm. You're a fool. Maybe, Eric said, smiling gently. But I'm your fool. A murmur of laughter rippled through the crowd. Even some warriors couldn't hide their smiles. The elders brought forth the heart sword, the ancient weapon that started it all. They placed it standing upright in the ground before Eric Vorkin's voice rang out. Place your hands on the sword and pour your spirit into it. If the blade accepts you, you will live and be one of us. Eric stepped forward. The sword glimmered faintly, as if it remembered him. He wrapped his hands around the hilt. It was cold at first, but then heat rushed into his palms, moving up his arms, flooding his mind with visions. He saw Soraka, her childhood, her training, her loneliness. He saw her pain of always being a weapon for her clan, never being seen. As more than Eric pushed back with his own feelings. His stubbornness, his belief in doing what's right, his desire to stand by her, not out of duty, but out of choice. The sword began to glow brighter, runes on its surface lighting up one by one. The crowd gasped. Then a blinding light shot upward from the sword, surrounding both Eric and Soraka. The energy wrapped around them like warm wind, like the sword was binding their fates together. When the light faded, Eric still stood, breathing hard but alive. Vorkin's eyes widened. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the blade. It has accepted you, Vorkin said. You are now clan-bound. You are her husband, one of us. A loud cheer broke out across the square. Warriors pounded their fists to their chests in respect. Elders nodded. Se, our AKA approached Eric, eyes wide with wonder. You really did it. Eric smiled at her. I said I'd choose you. I keep my promises. Soraka stared at him for a long moment, then, without warning, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. You are strange, human, she whispered. But you're mine now. And you're mine, Eric replied with a grin. Together, they stood, hand in hand as the clan gathered around them, not to judge, but to celebrate. Stories of that day spread across Tavara. Of the human who touched the heart sword, faced the sand maw, and chose an alien warrior as his wife not by accident, but by choice. Eric was no longer just a stranger on an alien world. He was husband of the clan, and with Soraka by his side, his new life was just beginning.